So a lot of that comes down then to something that we get the special treat of doing that not every monitor mix gets, is we have what's called panning. And panning is the little thing at the top. I'm moving it around. It will pan it left or right in your ears. If you're with an iPad, which I didn't know that everyone didn't know this, so I'm going to tell you all now. If you're looking at the iPad, it's reversed. If you move something to this side, you've actually fully moved it to that side, because the app is built so that you can look at the stage and move things around. So just a heads up the next time that you're on and you're like, I moved it and it doesn't sound right, it's because it's reversed. It's just a heads up. That's not always, but just be paying attention to that. Like whatever room you're in or space you're in that's using monitors, the panning can either do the same or opposite. And the trick with panning is to create space. You want to use panning to give yourself a bit of clarity and space in your mix so you can hear yourself better or what you need to hear better. There are some things that you never want to pan. Like bass is probably something you shouldn't pan. It gets a little disorienting and can kind of hurt your ears if you move your bass all the way to one side, because then you're going to compensate by turning it way up, embarrassingly high. Same with kick. Kick is one of those things that if you pan it, it can just be one of those things that you turn up 10 times louder than it needs to be. So don't pan those things. And usually if you're panning something, it's gonna feel quieter, because it is like, you can think of panning like listening on two halves of your head. We hear in what's called stereo, and our headphones are what's called stereo. If you only have one mix, it's called mono, because it's just one. But stereo is two, and then there's more beyond that, but we don't have headphones that can create that yet. Well, we kind of do. It's a brain trick, really is what it is. So if you pan something all the way to the side, it's actually gonna kind of feel like it's behind you. So like if you're, as a vocalist, if you pan yourself all the way back to one side, you're probably gonna feel like you're singing back here. So if you keep yourself in the center, that's how you're gonna actually have the most clarity, and then you can move everything else to the sides to get out of the way, is essentially what you want to do with your panning abilities. Some of the techniques for panning are positional. I use like a position-based panning technique, where if I'm in the center and Jenna's here and Rebecca's here, I'll pan them those directions. Or on this iPad, I would pan them opposites. So like I try not to fully pan vocalists, just because then they feel like they're behind me and it feels kind of weird. I would fully pan electric guitar players though, because they can feel like they're behind me and then it feels kind of nice. So that's kind of what I would do, is I would pan them to the sides of me if I was in the center, and then like if I was on that side, I would pan, them on this side and then put the click on the other side. So I like to sometimes pan positionally, or like if I'm an acoustic player and I'm playing here and my other acoustic player's on the other side of the stage, I'll pan him to this ear and me to the other one, so that I can hear a difference, so that as an acoustic player, we're not playing over each other like we discussed earlier, that we're not just playing the exact same thing all the time. And then, yeah, it's how we can separate voices and instruments so that we can have a better clarity of what we're playing and what they're playing. Some people like an all instruments to one side, all vocals to one side technique. I don't love it for that same reason of like, I feel like one of them's always gonna be louder than the other, and that's always not really what you want. But some people love that technique. Yeah, so that's panning. With panning, like I said, it's about creating space. So if we're going back to my main mix here, like I said, if I'm with two acoustic players, I'll put myself on the side of stage that I'm on, and then them on the other side of the stage. Get over there we go. And I would pan them like that. And then like a electric guitar player. I like really wide electrics, it's just a thing. So I would throw them out there, unless I was playing electric. If I was playing electric, I would keep it in the middle and pan everything else. Keys we hear in stereo, but I usually pan them to whatever position they're in. If I'm playing electric, I'll pan them really far so that I can hear what we're doing, because usually it's the piano player and the electric player that are going to accidentally play the same thing for a whole song, and we don't really want that. Bass, I said, keep it in the middle, and violin and like extra instruments, I'd say keep them centered so you can hear them, or pan them positionally if you're a vocalist, so that you can hear them where they are instead of being worried about how like they sound in the mix. Worry about more hearing what they're doing. Panning is one of those things that if your mix isn't great, panning's not going to help you. So like give yourself a good reference mix before you start panning things, because it could just make your mix worse because you're just making something that sounds too loud be too loud in one of your ears instead of both of your ears. So start with a good mix and then move into panning. And then the last kind of option that we have with the iPads, and it's probably the most complex, and this is one of those levels where, like I said, you got to get a good mix before you start messing with the rest of it, is going to be EQing. And some of the hardest things to understand with EQing is what those frequencies actually do. And it takes some playing around with it to actually make it into a space that sounds great. And some of it is preference-based. Some of it is preference-based, some of it's not. Like for me, this would usually be, like I would put my vocals like probably like this. Like I take a lot of the middle stuff out because I don't like when my voice sounds like really nasally in my head, because then I try and change how I sound so that, because I think I sound like I'm singing through my nose, but I'm actually not. It's just like how my pack is set. And so I'm trying to like adjust with the microphone to make sure it's not getting too much of my nose. Or like sometimes if you sing like this is gonna make you sound like you're singing through your nose. So mic technique side rabbit hole conversation. Make sure that your mic is like here. And you want it to be about this far away. And the further you get away from it, the thinner your voice is gonna get. Like, I already have a thin voice, I get it, I've learned it. And so I know that if I want to sound the fullest that I can, I need to be on that microphone. If we're in like a really thin, quiet moment in the song, it's fine to back off a little bit. Like we said today, if we're talking fullest of your song, you need to be right into that microphone so that you can be sounding as full as the band is gonna sound. If you're at like a quiet moment in the song, you can be a little bit further away. You can make it sound a little bit thinner, but if you wanna make it sound really intimate, really small, get close. Get close, but sing quiet. Because the thinner we get, the odds of us getting heard are lower. So you wanna be, if you're singing full power, back off a little bit so that you're not just yelling full force into a microphone, because you're still singing at the fullest you can. But if you're really, really quiet, or you're in a really high range in your voice and you feel like your vocal cords are really thin, get into them. Like when I sing falsetto, which I did once in like 6 years of singing on worship teams. It was on Christmas Eve because my vocal cords did not feel very nice. You get right up on the microphone so that your thinness can still get picked up and not just sound thin. So, vocal technique. Singing loud, back away from the microphone. Singing quiet, get right up there. And recognize that like when the band's really full, you gotta be really full into that microphone. And when the band's really quiet, you can back off just a little bit. And just know that that's what's happening to the microphone. And you can hear that in your ears, but sometimes your in-ears or your monitor is gonna cheat you a little bit to think that you're singing close enough, because you can still hear yourself. But sometimes you're so thin sounding that it doesn't fit with the whole group. And that's sometimes a challenge. Back to EQ. I would say like a lot of the time, you wanna be cutting out the low end of things. in the instruments that aren't bass. And that's pretty much like anything. Like I have, the green one is the low end on this. I usually put that like almost at 200 because your mix doesn't need your voice to have all those frequencies in just for pitch reference or anything like that. It's not gonna help your mix to have that in there. Same with like guitars and stuff. You don't need that stuff in there for your monitors to feel good. You don't need that in there. So yeah, I would usually, like this one's at 100, which is fine. I would probably run with that. I sometimes find, at least with vocalists, if you're taking out like a lot of your highs, you're gonna be able to hear yourself less because our headphones and our ears actually hear a lot of that high-end stuff as like clarity and air and sparkle, and the rest of those frequencies, the more you cut out of it, the more that like encloses you to like only hearing what, basically back to that, if you're plugging your ears feeling, it's gonna get back to that the more highs you take out. So I would actually usually like boost my highs. If you boost in like the 6K or 5K realm, all the numbers are at the bottom, so you can hear it now. It is happening in my voice. But you get a lot more of the S's and the T's are going to be more prominent. So if you boost ever in like this realm, you get a lot of this, and this hurts your ears. Just enjoy this for like a second. It hurts. So if you feel like there's a lot of that in a microphone, a little dip there. You want to be paying attention, one, to mud. What I would call mud and sibilance is your main problems with EQ, specifically vocals, and then like nasal tone. And like some people have more nasal tone than others, and like I said, you can control nasal tone with mic position. You can also control it with your EQing, and within the like frequency realm, if you like this is nose, this is nasal, like 500 to 600 to like even to about 1,000, right? Yeah, about there is still nasal tone. So if you feel like you're super in your nose, it's probably that frequency that's causing that. And like everybody doesn't love that sound, we'll say. And some people have nicer tonal things than others, and we learned that in our vocal session too, of like how to control that. But yeah, knowing that you can control that, at least in your ears, should help some of us get some of that clarity. Yeah. Vocal-wise, I think that's as far as I'll get before we get way too complicated with some things. Sibilance thing, about 5K. If you dip in the 5K realm, that's what it's taking out. And everything above that is kind of like your air and like it just provides some space. And like, it just, for me, it makes my ears feel less like I'm talking straight at myself and a little bit like I'm in a room that I'm talking to myself. But that's personal preference. That's not in everybody. Some people like taking out their highs because they're like, I don't like sounding like a female. I've just come to admit that I'm a tenor and that my voice is a little bit higher than the average person's. So like I can control how my acoustic sounds in my ears, and that will affect just the monitors, not everybody else's space. No, this is a bad acoustic. Yeah, this is a bad acoustic mix. If you're doing this, you don't like how your acoustic sounds. That's what that sounds like. I like how my acoustic sounds. So to be honest, I don't usually touch my acoustic. I sometimes take some of the picking noise out of it, which I'll teach you guys where it is, just because if there's anything that's gonna dominate a mix, it's gonna be the pick noise of an acoustic. So there's that. Instrument-wise, anything pretty much 200 and under is going to be like bass frequencies or like the thump of the acoustic. Like sometimes I'll do shows where I'll like do like the percussive stuff on acoustic. You need everything in the 200 hertz range to play acoustic with the, like the whole percussive thing going on. Anything above 200 to like 500 is where you get the like muddiness or boxiness is sometimes how it's described. Like on a kick drum, I pretty much always do this. It's just like, there's none of it in there. Because I hate, or a cajon. I've ranted about this to some people, but I hate how a cajon sounds. Because it looks like a box, and it sounds like a box. And then when we mic it, it just sounds like a cardboard box that you're hitting with something. And so I like to take some of the boxiness out of things. That's in that 200 to 300 realm. Same kind of thing can happen with your vocals. To take, if you're hearing like too much of like you're in a box or like you can't get out of the small room feeling, you might have too much of that like 300 hertz range in either the mic you're using or the room that you're in. So to take that out is a good option. With some instruments, if it feels like they got really thin, like if an acoustic guitar sounds really thin, there's probably too much of this taken out. It's the warmth of an acoustic guitar. This realm is feel. Like if it feels really thin, there's probably too much of it taken out. Yeah, it's about that round. Anything in the like the 1000 range, which is this one, is what I would describe as like a radio frequency. Like if something feels like an FM radio is the sound that's producing it, it's probably because there's too much 1000, and like I can do it with my vocals. This sounds like I'm from an old radio, and if you can hear this sound, there's two things that can happen. Sometimes it really helps you stick out, and sometimes it helps you really stick out in ways that you don't want it to, or like you really need that realm. Sometimes vocals, when you're mixing it, really need that to stick out, and sometimes they don't. So in like an acoustic guitar, you kind of need that 1000 to feel like your instrument's actually making an impact. On acoustic guitar and bass and kick drum, your 2000 hertz, 2000K, 2000 hertz, because 2000K would be like a million. Your 2K realm to about 4K realm is like pick noise, pluck noise, and like the kick beater noise. So like having a little bit of that in there on like a kick drum is really helpful. On your acoustic guitar, if you feel like you're really like the pick sound is really dominant, just pull a little bit of that out. So like let's do a little bit of this. This is what my acoustic one would probably look like. Get that out of there. So I'd be taking the pick noise out and just a little bit of the boxy noise out, because that's all. I just like my acoustic pickups. That's all. I like my acoustic guitar. So being able to take out some of that striking pick noise can just make you feel like you can still play and not like I have to play softer because my pick noise is so loud. Taking out that 2K will help with that. Same with bass. If you feel like every time you pluck a string, it like really sticks out, taking some of that 2K to 4K world out will help clear that up for you. Everything above that is like boosting this realm in a vocal can make you see like really tinny. Boosting a lot in the like this room, like I said, makes it feel really S-y. That's for vocals. And then everything above that in most instruments is like how we get our definition. It's like the treble on most instruments is everything above 5K. And a lot of the time we're like feeling those more than hearing those. Like if something feels like it's piercing or really stabby, it's usually something like 4K to 20K. The average person, when you are born and have good hearing, you can only hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, which is why we can control everything up to 20,000 hertz. Everything pretty much from 50 hertz below, you actually probably feel more than you hear. So having that in your ears isn't always helpful, because you're not, the little tiny driver that your headphone is not gonna be able to produce the sound that you want out of it. So being able to control that is super helpful. EQ is probably the thing to not get lost in, but be aware of, because you can go on for days about EQing. So don't spend too much time EQing if you haven't done the work to make your mix part of it sound good. Yeah. When it comes to like monitors and stuff, I would be generous with like how wide you do it, because the like smaller you get, the less you're doing. The smaller that needle looks, the less like you actually end up taking out, and you have to spend so much more time doing it, and usually you don't have that much time. You don't want to like you want to be able to get to through a rehearsal and be confident that you can walk in on Sunday morning or an event and just go, okay, I know that everything sounds good enough to be confident in what I'm playing. I can confidently sing, I can confidently be on time and be good. So I would be generous with it. What's the actual number? Like 1/3 is probably what it says right there. Anything beyond that's a little big. You're like, every time you EQ something out, you're essentially turning that frequency down, which would bring the volume of it down. So like I've been in rooms where their EQs just look like this, and it's like, oh, really? Like all you wanted to do was turn the whole thing down. You weren't taking out frequencies you didn't like. You just took out the whole thing. Like like the wider you get, the more you're taking out. So like this would essentially be just turning the whole thing down. So being like moderate with how wide you're EQing is probably the best bet. So yeah, not being too focused, not being too wide, find a good middle ground, and then taking those like, oh, my S's are too strong, I'm gonna take everything that's around 5K out. Oh, I feel too nasally, I'm gonna take everything in like the 500 to 800 realm, just down a little bit. Oh, like I feel too boxy, take everything in like that 200 to 300 room, just slightly out. I suggest like 5. Anything beyond that has to be a frequency that you really don't like you don't want to hear it. You want to boost or you want to cut before you boost at all times. Like when you mix front of house, if you mix front of house, you want to be cutting a lot of the time. If you're boosting, the more you boost, it's that same idea of like you're just changing how something sounds every time you EQ something. And if you're boosting, you probably just like don't really like what it sounds like. So I would always start with cutting, and then if you want to boost, it has to actually add. So like I said, like I would probably boost the like very top end of my vocals so that I can hear like some of the air, and like it sometimes like can be like refreshing is a word that I've heard used to describe boosting some of the highs in something. I do sometimes with the same thing with an acoustic. I'll boost the highs in it just to give it like a sparkle. Same with electrics. I would boost a little bit of the highs to give it like sparkle. Or like really dead kick drums. If you can't hear like the clicking of the kick drum, to boost that part of it. But we don't always get that much control with that. But yeah, I would always cut first. Sometimes even like bass wise, boosting your low end on a bass helps because you don't have to turn your fader up as high. And then you don't have to like EQ out to turn the volume down. You can just keep the volume at a good spot and turn the bass up. But Wally, any suggestions on that one? Cut first? Sounds good.